Ready to go live. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, Chaz Jenkins. I'm so privileged and honored to have him come on to the podcast today. So how are you doing, Chaz? Tell us where exactly you are in the UK and what's happening in your city and what's going on this week.
Sure. Hi, Wayne. Thanks for having me on. Delighted to be here. I'm in the UK. I'm in sort of like the countryside. So midway between London and Brighton, which is on the south coast of the UK. So it's sort of like trees outside, quite peaceful, certainly a lot more peaceful than London.
Fantastic, because I heard so much about the south coast, right, of UK. Are you like following Brighton, the English Premier League club?
Yeah, so Brighton's like about 10 miles away. And I don't go there enough because I'm basically too old. I used to live there, and it was great living by the sea in a party town. I mean, Brighton was built as a party town 200 years ago. These days, it's just sort of like a big town with great quality of life. Wonderful place to be. Yeah. So yeah.
Fantastic. And obviously, we're not going to talk about football. This is not what this platform is for. We're going to talk more about music marketing, especially music. I think it's in your blood. It's in my blood as well. And this continues the running theme of this show where recently I had someone from industrial band, Laibach, the band leader actually came onto the show and told us about his upcoming live streams, which unfortunately, due to COVID-19, right? Even a live stream is facing some challenges. So they had to basically cancel that event. But the live chat with him was really an eye-opener for me. And today, it's a fantastic way for me to learn about Chartmetric. And we all know that Chartmetric is an incredible company. And lots of people told me great things about it. Maybe give us a 1-minute elevator pitch, what Chartmetric is all about and what is your role in the company?
Sure. Chartmetric, what we do is we bring in data from the music industry, not sort of like data like stream counts and things and sales. What we're interested in is the market data which tells you about the marketplace. And with music, that's something we've always had. Music industry has always had sources of market-wide data, like the charts. Every country had its own charts. But these days, the volume of data created by consumers of music has just exploded. The way to think about it is 20, 30 years ago, the average music consumer was buying 2 CDs per year globally, and therefore creating on average 2 data points per year. These days, music was one of the first forms of media to really embrace and be embraced by digital and by the internet. So the average music consumer today globally creates 20,000 data points per year. That means there's a vast amount of data out there to help us understand the marketplace and how people discover music, learn about artists, share artists. And that's what we do at Chartmetric. We gather in all of that data so that our users, artists, record companies, and brands from outside the music industry who have an interest in music, we can help them understand and gain insight in the marketplace so they can better engage with consumers.
This is amazing. And you already mentioned a few, incredible points. The one that really resonates especially is about only 2 data points, right? I remember when I was a teenager and I was hanging out in Tower Records in Singapore, right, where I'm based. I only have enough budget for like 2 or 3 CDs maximum a month. And probably like 2 or 3 bands that I discovered or, became a fan as a result, of purchasing their CDs. So nowadays it's like we have Spotify, we have even TikTok, which is like doing great things when it comes to music discovery. We have Apple Music as well, and of course Amazon is in the picture as well. It's like a huge, myriad of genres and bands and artists that we can discover on a daily basis, right? And not to forget playlists as well that our friends are sharing with us almost 24/7. And how my children, Gen Z kids, are discovering music these days is through playlists that their friends actually, shared with them. So tell us more about that in terms of how is this going to change, the way that measuring, tracking, or even, helping an artist to grow an audience or to build a community. How does actually using data analytics help them in this cause?
Sure. Well, when I was a kid growing up, I had enough money to buy 3 records per year. And I started buying music before the CD existed. I'm that old, and so basically in that era, you could be a fan of 3 artists because you couldn't be a fan unless you owned a CD or an album. You had to have that physical product to be a fan. And so we listened to very little music in the old days. And you had this concept of the fan, people who were, and fans were almost cliquey. You had an artist had their fan base, and fan bases were incredibly loyal. And we have to remember the origin of the word fan. Fan is short for fanatic. And that means something special, something very particular. And, my favorite band could go away for 18 months without releasing any music, without touring to record a new album and come back. And the fans, the fanatics would be outside the record store door on Monday morning when their new album was released, because there was that level of devotion. Today, we don't have fans in the same way. We have followers. And followers are, we often say, three F's: fickle, flirtatious, and forgetful. Because, we're able to listen to so much more music now. And, consumers, it's not just a case of only listening to 3 artists, as I could do in the old days, because I could only buy 3 albums a year. Today, for the same amount of money, which I used to spend on music, you can listen to absolutely anything. You almost don't actually need money, because you can use ad-funded streaming services these days to listen to music. So an advertiser is paying for you. So consumers are listening to a far more diverse range of music. That level of engagement, though, between audiences and artists is more challenging for artists to really build. Artists still need to really engage with audiences, but it's more challenging through this much more sort of noisy, vibrant marketplace. With Chartmetric, what we're doing is we analyze data, not just from the streaming services, but from social networks, from various web analytics platforms. And we bring in data from traditional media as well, such as radio and TV syncs, to help people understand consumer behavior, to help the industry and artists understand the way consumers today find, discover, share music between themselves.
This is amazing, and I think it's 100% spot on when it comes to the amount of choices that music consumers now actually have on their fingertips, on their mobile phones especially, yep. Right? And every day it becomes like tougher to make a decision like, what album should I listen today? And most times, right, the easy way out is to simply check out what your friends are listening on their curated playlists, because we no longer even dive into music by listening to full albums. Perhaps a playlist is something that it's a great way to share music and to discover music. So for yourself personally, what are the bands that that you listen to in terms of how they actually are able to grow an audience as well? Are there some specific examples of artists who are successful, crushed it, when it comes to not just curating playlists, but growing an audience, building a community? How did they actually use analytics and data to successfully achieve that? Give us a specific example of artists we have crushed it.
Sure. I mean, fundamentally these days, artists are generally most successful when they treat music treat streaming services, especially, as social networks. Because fundamentally, in actual fact, most of what we think of as streaming services, whether it's Spotify or Deezer, these services are actually built on the same architecture as a social network. They depend on social interaction, listeners telling other listeners, or sharing music on playlists or via posts on social networks. Essentially, this is going to sound, I'll make a lot of people annoyed about saying this, but the music industry has never been good at marketing. The music industry has always done great commercial marketing to retailers, marketing to radio stations, but it's relied on the promotion that radio and retail store exposure gives to its products in order to go the final mile and engage with consumers and result in a sale. Today, in a sense, all of that, that fan to fan engagement, listeners telling other listeners about music and sharing music, which was so critical to the music industry before, that still applies these days. But, when I was a kid, my taste in music was shaped by my friends. But I had 4 friends because I grew up before the internet and before streaming services. Today, same thing happens. Friends tell friends. But these days, nobody has 4 friends. People have 400 friends or 4,000 friends. And so that social interaction drives music forward. But still the same today. What my friends listen to influences me. It's just my friends are all over the place now. They're diverse. So I listen to music from different parts of the world. Artists who succeed tend to be artists who put themselves in the situation and, create content, use socials themselves, and release music in patterns which really sort of benefits from this sort of very social marketplace. We're always fascinated by emerging artists. So a lot of record companies use Chartmetric to discover new talent, discover new artists. And what we see these days is new artists often engage with people early on out of their own country. I mean, there was this old philosophy in the music industry that if you're in a record company, you find great talent by going to a gig and watching the band on stage. You sign them, and then you pay for that artist to go into a studio to record a record, and then you'd release that. You release a track in your own country, just in your own country, not anywhere else. And if it was successful, maybe you'd release another track with the band. And if that was successful, you'd give the band enough money to record an album and then release the album still in that home market, never anywhere else. In fact, the artist probably wouldn't be able to have anything released in any other country until they'd had 2 really successful albums. And very, very few artists ever got to that stage. Generally, the number of global stars each year was far less than 100, and they only ever came from really 2 countries, the US and UK, maybe one a decade from Sweden and Australia. These days, kids, artists, really young artists can record music in their bedroom, because you don't need a complex studio these days to record music, and you can release it yourself globally in 200 countries within 24 hours. So it's just sort of, there's a level of democratization which has been achieved in music these days. And what we often see now is that these artists who are recording their own music, releasing their own music, and using socials effectively, what they often do is they start building audiences themselves really quickly, but not in their home country. Quite often, the places where they're building audiences are places on the other side of the world, 10,000 miles away, where they've never been. There's an amazing artist at the moment from the UK called Biba Doobie. She just released her first album last week, but she's already a star. She's already a star because she started releasing music herself 3 years ago. And despite being a British artist with a very British sound, she started building audiences, not in London first, but in Sao Paulo and in Jakarta, on places the other side of the world, but places where audiences just engage with her music quickly and then shared, use socials, to be fair, more effectively than consumers in the West. Can you still hear us, Wayne?
Yes, I can still hear you perfectly. Please go on.
Yeah, in a sense, this is why it's particularly interesting discussing this with you in Asia, is that music consumers in Southeast Asia and Latin America as well, they tend to use social networks more. Certainly to share music with their friends, discuss music with their friends. And so often we see these places such as Singapore, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and then Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. These are the markets which really identify artists early and are shaping our global music tastes these days. It's not necessarily the case that all the big musicians in the world come from these markets, but these markets are identifying, are latching on to new artists far, far earlier. And then socially, consumers in these markets just promote them through their general, normal social behavior.
This is
That's a really long answer.
Ripping on this topic, I've gained so much insights from that alone. And there were two key things that you mentioned. I think the fact that the music record labels and the music industry they really suck at marketing, right? Is something that I totally agree. There's so many incredible albums that were released, in the decade since I've been a follower and a fan of music, right? That after the first week, it completely went off the radar. It's like you never heard of a great album that to be continuously and consistently being promoted or be mentioned either on media or radio or anywhere. Even though that album obviously has legs, and if a marketer is able to see that it's a long-term game rather than it's a short-term, and just focus all their energies on week one, right? It's like it's not doing a lot of a good, it's a disservice to the bands and the artists themselves. So I think you nailed it on the head on that point. And maybe you can tell us a little bit why it's important now that this game has changed completely. It's no longer about being just, seeing action during week one, right? It's important to even continue until week 51, week 151. It's going to be a long-term game, and building an audience is not like overnight thing where you just buy followers, or fake, audiences and expect to crush it all the time. And that game has, being a long dead for a long time, because the algorithm knows, if your followers are bots. So organic is all about, the importance of, focusing on that to grow, your audience especially. So that's my number one takeaway from that, a 5-minute reel from yours. The second point you mentioned as well, about being really, great at focusing on overseas markets. Yeah, in Singapore, where there are loads of great creative talents, musicians as well, and they're always focusing on, releasing albums locally, and they have never, even look at the world as being the world is abundant, and the audiences who might like the sound probably come as far away as Ukraine, or like you mentioned, for the artist that is breaking out right now, she has gained success in places like Southeast Asia and Brazil. I think this is where you can probably advise my band. I recently have a new band that I, just started after 20 years not playing music, and we are like a stoner rock, industrial strength, psychedelic rock and roll band. So we're very focused, on not just making sure our music is great, but ensuring that we don't do a disservice to it by marketing it badly. What is your advice to my band?
Well, God, lots of advice.
To continue. Yeah. Okay.
What you said was absolutely right. I mean, when I used to work for record companies, you could guarantee that at some point during a sales meeting, somebody would bang their fist on the table and would say, it's all about week one. Meaning, you had to get a really high chart position during the first week of release in order to get the maximum exposure in retailers and on radio, and then have big sales in the second week. Today, the market's very different. Consumers discover music and share music in a very different way. And these days, it's not about week one, it's about week 51. Where are you 51 weeks a year later? Have you managed to continuously grow? Because essentially, if your revenues are under a graph and your graph is going all the way like that across a year, it's much better than going like that. So, fundamentally, the economics have changed behind all of this. The economics of the old industry, and the music industry has been around for 100 years. The economics of that old industry were based around pretty traditional business practices. Companies operated in one country alone, and they had international licensing deals and distribution deals with companies in other countries. These are aggregated together into big global corporations, but still that sort of business structure even existed in the big global corporations. And that meant, basically very, very few artists ever got to see their music released internationally, because you couldn't prioritize many releases across an entire catalog. And the result of this is Two countries dominated the global marketplace, the US and the UK, and success bred success. The more artists they were able to produce who were successful, the more they had to invest in new artists. And so if you wind back to the 1980s, I think the UK artists in particular, UK, this small country with 1% of the world's population, the UK artists represented 28% of global music revenues. The internet has changed that. Digital has fundamentally changed that, because although the industry, the music industry, still has borders around each country, consumers don't. Consumers engage with each other virtually over social networks, directly all around the world. Friendship circles are measured in their thousands. Influence flows from market to market. And crucially, these infamous algorithms, which digital services, social networks employ, they're not really interested in location. They're interested in location when it comes to helping advertisers focus down on getting the best results for their spend. But when it comes to sort of like picking up on trends, these popularity algorithms employed by services and socials are looking for content that is trending anywhere, and especially trending internationally, cross-border, and then they promote them even more. So essentially, in a sense, why, from that point of view, would you focus on just promoting your content in a market like the UK, which only represents 1% of the world's population? How are you really going to make a difference and crucially get these algorithms working in your favor if you're only addressing 1% of the population? And even Indonesia with 4% of the world's population, that's not going to make much difference. USA with 4.5% of the world's population, that still doesn't make much of a difference. We have to think, for any artist, think globally. And that shouldn't be daunting. Although it may sound intimidating to think, oh my God, we have to reach audiences around the world. In a sense, it's almost freedom, because there's so many more people globally who are likely to be interested in your music than in just one small place. So why not engage with them, work out, what these people are interested in, what your potential audience is interested in, and work out ways to engage with them. Because there's one thing which is absolutely, without doubt, and that's people love discovering new music. Spotify, early on when they started off, they had a brand slogan which they used all the time, which was they described Spotify as a music discovery service, which at the time sounded quite strange. But in actual fact, it's been their complete raison d'etre, and it's why Spotify is so successful, because it's constantly offering you new music. It is not suggesting the same old thing. It's not suggesting old things which were big 20 years ago. And, it's constantly suggesting new things, because people love discovering new music. They like surprises. And if they get bored, they'll go and listen elsewhere, or they'll go and play games, or they'll go and spend their money elsewhere.
So before we dive deeper and get more advice, on how artists can leverage insights from analytics and data and to take necessary actions on those insights, right? Let's maybe back it up a little bit and go back to the start of your career, right? Especially how you navigated your career, because I think you had incredible experience and background that started with working in a nightclub to concert promotions to even launching your own music label. So how did you end up in Chartmetric? Isn't the data analytics boring to someone with your background?
Not really, because I've always been, whether I was working as a nightclub promoter or promoting concerts and then setting up record labels, fundamentally, you've always got to understand your potential marketplace, because you've always got to find new customers. You've got to replenish your audience coming into the club, or you've got to find new people to buy concert tickets, or you've got to find an audience for CDs or downloads or whatever. how do you find new audiences? Well, you understand the marketplace, so you're better able to market whatever you're doing to consumers. And in a sense, one of Chartmetric, and partly, it exemplifies my frustration about the old way of doing things. It was very, very difficult to market in the old days, to identify audiences and understand the marketplace. Essentially, what we're trying to do is help our users understand what is going on, where the opportunities are, what is the new talent, what is emerging. And so, and that is a thing which has always interested me most, whether it's working in clubs, promoting concerts, or in record labels. It's always, how can we do better? Where are the opportunities? I don't like, the music industry often talks about Route 1. There used to be a standard way of doing things. I don't really like that. That sounds really boring to me. I want opportunities. I want whatever I'm working on to do better than anything I've ever worked on before. Do it better than, I want to have ambition with everything I work on. And data, insight, understanding the marketplace, hopefully gives people that inspiration, gives people an idea how they can make things better in the future.
100%. I think for CMOs who make our core audience and digital marketers especially, data analytics is definitely not boring. It's actually a godsend. So for those outside of the industry, perhaps they might think that it's something that is, too scientific, or it's like, how you even describe your company, Chartmetric, right? It's a machine learning company. Maybe tell us more in terms of that. Why is it also a machine learning company? And what are some of the biggest benefits to artists and music labels?
Sure. I mean, I often say that data is nothing new in the music industry, or any industry for that matter. We've always had in any industry sources of data which told us about the marketplace. These didn't in the past involve big databases and APIs and machine learning. We didn't need that, because in the old days, there wasn't much data. You could absorb it into your brain. You could process it in your brain and make a decision, gain an insight from all the information you'd absorbed and make a decision and do something. Today, there's just too much data. There's way too much data. It's at 2 to 20,000 data points today, and then multiplied across the population globally. So, these days you need complex solutions to manage this sort of data. And it's not just a question of bringing in data and saying, right, we've got all the data, let's look at it. Again, the human brain cannot process even all of this data, even if you've got it in one place. You need machines to help you. You need machines to join data together and predict and understand trends, so that the machine can do the heavy work, but you're in a sense still able to get the insight, that simple insight from all of this data, and make a decision. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I think it's perfectly splendid how you explained it. Also, in terms of leveraging the insight on data and acting upon it, right? That's the game changer. And end of the day, these are just tools, right? And the data analytics are just mere tools. So in terms of like a changing strategy, when it's necessary to do so, or to achieve success in growing an audience, give us a more specific example, right? Recently, where an artist or a music label who work closely with you are able to change their strategy as a result of some insights that they gained from all this data analytics strategy that they had and the implementation, and how they actually achieve success, by actually taking action on it.
Sure. I mean, I sort of touched on it before, but one of the things we're always recommending to labels is look at your international data. Every record label, every manager, wants to break artists. They want to be able to take an artist who's unknown and make them a huge global star. And, you know, the old Route One way of doing things in the music industry is very much based around break in your home market and then take them globally. Today, we're always advising always advising artist managers and labels to look at the data, think outside the box. In other words, think outside your own country. Look to see where artists are engaging an audience elsewhere. And then if that place is sort of like 10,000 miles away, don't think, oh my God, we've got to send the artist on a plane there to do TV shows and appear on radio. Think about other ways to engage with audiences, because the reality is that, you know, the audiences in that other country, you know, they aren't listening to radio. They aren't watching television, because they're probably getting all their content from digital, which is how they discovered your music in the first place. So when you see pockets like these, think, how do we use digital media to increase engagement with audiences in these places and get audiences to amplify what we're doing? You know, build fan bases and, in a sense, grow fan bases outwards, no matter where that location is. And that's something we're constantly working with labels on. Now, it's almost working the other way now. In the, you know, we did a big research project last year, and we published the results. The project was called Trigger Cities. And essentially, we work with the A&R teams at record labels in America, you know, the people who go out and find new artists, new talent, and sign it to the record label. And traditionally, of course, they wanted to sign US artists, and they were looking in the US trying to find artists. We almost said, right, okay, carry on signing US artists, but don't look for them in the US. Look for them in other countries, especially if they're pop artists, look in Southeast Asia, or if they're rock artists, look in Latin America, because these places, you know, things emerge really, really quickly. And, you know, and as a result, quite a lot of artists have been signed off the back of that change in process. You know, look in the hot spots around the world rather than just locally for talent.
So with all these tools at our disposal, and if a marketer is able to nail it, you know, in terms of the right strategy and implementation, leveraging on data and analytics, they would probably do very well in the game, right? So, you know, maybe artists and musicians around the world, in all corners of the globe, you know, they have a lot of hope right now, you know, because hearing how this can actually be, they can be discovered as well, you know, if they are creating content at scale, especially on all these DSPs or even on all these music platforms. There is no longer that fear that, you know, their music label employers are going to just market their album or new creation for just 1 week, and if it doesn't do well, you know, and that's it, and they will never, you know, have a career in music at all. So I know it's great insights from you in terms of how, you know, you can leverage on the insights on data and then acting upon it. All these analytics. Tell us about this Holy Trinity. It's something that I heard in one of your podcasts. Does Holy Trinity refer to, you know, we're all familiar with Instagram, Facebook, and I think maybe Spotify is in that picture as well. Is it, you know, 100% fact that if you crush it on these three platforms, your music career is going to take off? What is your opinion on that? Across all platforms. What's your take on that?
So the Holy Trinity is just, it's an observation, in a sense that most artists who've emerged over recent years and become really successful, you know, are very, very good at engaging audiences on lots of platforms, but there's always three platforms which are always present. You know, Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. You know, artists who've become successful recently, you know, have success in other places, but those three platforms are common to all of them who've become successful recently. You know, increasingly we're seeing TikTok become part of this mix as well, although I wouldn't say it's necessarily part of the mix. And it doesn't necessarily mean that this Holy Trinity will stay the same either. It could be one of those services is no longer part of the Holy Trinity in the future. But in a sense, it's an observation, rather than necessarily saying, if you're successful in these three places, you will be successful. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
And I think I think it sort of demonstrates as well, because these are platforms which very much require artists to really embrace them. You know, to post photos on and videos on Instagram, to create great content in YouTube, and to really embrace and sort of use the social functionality which exists in Spotify as well. It sort of like demonstrates that although the record industry, and you know, I said I'd get into trouble for saying the record industry isn't good at marketing. And you know, the record industry has never had to do marketing because it does promotion really, really well. It invests and it enables promotion. Marketing is really something which ultimately artists have always done, because in a sense it's the artists who are engaging with the consumers. It's the artists who are doing shows. It's the artists who are appearing on the radio stations, doing interviews, etc. So artists are really the people who drive forward the marketing because they engage with the marketplace directly.
This is brilliant. And, you know, we have to reluctantly, you know, just squeeze in one last question. I have like prepared dozens of questions for you, but due to the lack of time, you know, we have very finite time in this program. So we're going to just, you know, just to tell us where we can actually hit you up, and in terms of like finding, you know, more about what Chartmetric, you know, all the fantastic things you guys are doing in terms of music analytics that are driven by data science. Is there a website you can point us to? How do we actually reach out to you?
Sure. Chartmetric, our website is easy to find. It's chartmetric.com. And the service is free to sign up for. We provide a free tier, which is very much geared towards the needs of individual artists. So basic Chartmetric data is the basic service is completely free, and then for more advanced users, you know, artists who are starting to really build an audience, and for record companies and other companies as well, we provide a premium subscription service as well with a lot more data and a lot more insight. We also publish a lot of research on our blog and our podcast, you know, sort of focusing on different aspects of the industry and other related industries as well who use music. So, so we've just been working recently on a number of features on our blog and for Billboard magazine, based on sync, how the promotion of music in TV shows is changing with the growth of Netflix and streaming video on demand services.
This is fantastic, and I have to thank you once again, and I'm sorry that we stretched beyond 30 minutes. I have the tendency to do so. When
I do as well.
Especially, you know, you're a great communicator, and you're giving us a lot of value and insights on this particular area where maybe many musicians or artists or even music labels are not too familiar with before the start of this program. So thank you once again for coming on the podcast, and you give us so much insight. So I would like to re-invite you back again to tell us what's going on maybe in a couple of months' time. So
Great.
In the meantime, keep yourself safe and take care of one another.
Thank you, Wayne, and I'd be delighted to come on again. Thanks ever so much. Bye.
Thank you. Yes. Bye. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's Chaz Jenkins, who is the CCO of Chartmetric. So he's the Chief Commercial Officer at Chartmetric. You can find the website at chartmetric.com. He's also the former VP of International Marketing at Universal Music Group, and is the co-founder. In fact, he's the founder at Grammy Award-winning label LSO Live. So maybe just to give you a run through in terms of like our podcast, right? To listen to more episodes, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple, on Spotify, and Google. You can simply just search CMO Asia Podcast and you'll find us easily. So once you are subscribed, you'll be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, on your iPads, or your computers as soon as we publish them. So please don't forget to submit your review and comments as well. It means a lot to us. So that's deeply highly appreciated. We'll see you at the next podcast live stream where I have Darren Ray from ESPN. He's going to come on and talk about his broadcasting career, and of course some marketing tips as well for sports broadcasters. So I'll see you at the next live stream. So in the meantime, same thing that I'm going to say to everyone: keep yourself safe and take care of one another. Bye-bye.